Master Chief Harrison Thorne snatched the assignment sheet, looked straight at the young teenager standing before his unit, and let out a laugh. It wasn't a polite or surprised laugh. It was loud, contemptuous, and echoed across the entire base like a final verdict. "What is this?" he scoffed, holding the paper up as if it were trash. "They sent me a child." His men joined in the mockery immediately. In that fleeting moment, every single person on that base made the exact same assumption.
And they were entirely wrong. If this story has already gripped your attention, hit that subscribe button and drop your city in the comments below. I want to see exactly how far this tale travels. Now let's go back to where it all began. The Nevada desert is an unforgiving place. It pardons neither weakness nor arrogance, and it absolutely punishes false assumptions. Lyra Hayes had known this her entire life. Growing up in a remote town outside of Reno, where the searing heat arrived early and lingered endlessly, the sprawling land demanded that you either learn to read its signs or let it swallow you whole. Lyra had learned to read it. In fact, she had mastered reading the subtle things that most people completely overlooked. But that was precisely the problem. Standing at 5'6" and weighing 132 pounds with her heavy pack on, she was young, quiet, and profoundly observant. Her dark hair was pulled back tautly, framing eyes of a striking, icy gray, eyes that people often described as either cold or calculating, depending entirely on whether they liked her or not. And upon first meeting her, most people did not. She was too still, speaking rarely, and watching everything with unnerving intensity. In a world that constantly rewarded loud bravado, her unique brand of silence was almost always misconstrued as either stupidity or sheer arrogance. The grueling drive to the base had taken hours, cutting through a desolate landscape of rock, scrub brush, and a silence so heavy it pressed against the eardrums. She had sat alone in the back of the transport vehicle, her pack resting between her feet and her hands neatly folded, watching the scratched window as the terrain shifted. The soldiers assigned to transport her hadn't spoken a single word during the trip. They had exchanged one knowing glance when she climbed in, then stared blankly at the road, treating her like a burdensome package they preferred to ignore. She was accustomed to that. The welcome. When the vehicle finally halted, the suffocating heat hit her like a physical blow. By late morning, the temperature was already soaring past 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The sprawling base consisted of low concrete structures and training facilities cordoned off by chain-link fences surrounded by endless open desert in every direction. Adjusting the heavy pack onto her shoulders, Lyra walked steadily toward the main building. She heard them long before she saw them. The voices bleating around the corner were boisterous and bursting with the specific, unshakable confidence of men who knew exactly where they stood in the world. Rounding the corner, she faced a dozen men fully clad in tactical gear. They were hardened warriors in their physical prime, sculpted by years of relentless training. These were the absolute elite, highly decorated, experienced, and incredibly lethal. And the moment they spotted her, every single one of them stopped dead in their tracks. At the helm stood Master Chief Harrison Thorne. Lyra had read his file, too. With a legendary combat record spanning numerous deployments, his instructional philosophy boiled down to a singular, brutal truth. Weakness has no place here, and I will find yours. Broad-shouldered and weathered by harsh suns and darker situations, his scanning, cataloging eyes locked onto her. He glanced down at his clipboard, looked back up, and laughed. As his men echoed his low, rumbling chuckle, the sound struck Lyra somewhere deep beneath her ribs. It wasn't enough to shatter her, but it certainly registered. "Hayes," Thorne said, a distinctly cold smile playing on his lips. "Yes, sir," she replied smoothly. He raised the clipboard.
It says here you've been assigned to train with this unit for the upcoming evaluation cycle as part of a joint program. He paused deliberately. Does that sound right to you?
Yes, sir. Thorne turned to his men. You hear that? The entire cycle. The laughter instantly hardened. Looks like someone in Washington decided we needed a science experiment. Someone in the back yelled, "What division center, Chief? The Girl Scouts?" The laughter erupted louder. Lyra remained perfectly still. Her breathing was measured, her hands relaxed at her sides. She held Thorne's gaze without flinching. Catching this, his smile shifted into something far more calculating. You got something to say, Hayes? No, sir. Good. Then let me explain how this works. I don't care what tests you passed, what scores you hold, or what out-of-touch committee deemed you special. Out here, none of that matters. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. What matters is survival. Performing under conditions that would break fully grown, highly trained adult men. And looking at you, I don't see someone capable of that. Do you know what I see? She waited. I see a liability, he said. I see someone I'm going to have to watch every second so she doesn't get herself killed. I see a political checkbox that someone made my problem. Am I being crystal clear? Crystal clear, sir. A massive chiseled blonde man to her left, his name tape reading Dempsey, stepped up. Chief want me to escort her to the washout quarters? Save us all some time. Not yet, Dempsey. Thorne murmured, his eyes still boring into Lyra. She wants the full experience. Don't you, Hayes? I'm here to train, she stated evenly. You're here to fail, he corrected, framing it not as cruelty, but as an absolute statement of fact. But I'll let you do it at your own pace. Thorne instantly pivoted, dismissing her completely. Gallagher, he barked at a lean, red-haired man. Get her settled in the solo auxiliary quarters. I don't want her in with the team until she earns it. If she earns it. Looking at her like she was an unwanted burden, Gallagher muttered, Come on. As she followed him, she heard Thorne immediately transition back to the schedule, erasing her from his mind. It was the first time she felt the urge to speak up, not to argue, but to state a truth she ultimately swallowed and locked away. She understood the mechanics of being underestimated. The underestimation wasn't the obstacle. It was the advantage. Let them not watch her. The ones who weren't watching never saw the shot coming. The crucible begins. The auxiliary room was barren and isolated, containing only a cot, a footlocker, and a window framing the desolate desert. Gallagher dropped her paperwork unceremoniously. Reveille is before dawn. First formation shortly after. You get standard gear and no special accommodations. Pausing at the door, a flicker of genuine curiosity crossed his face. How old are you, actually? I'm a teenager, she replied. He blinked in disbelief. Why are you here? Because someone decided I should be, she answered steadily. He lingered a moment longer before leaving. Alone. Lyra carefully unpacked her sole personal possession, a worn, small photograph of a man standing in a sunlit field at dusk. After a quiet moment, she laid it face down on the footlocker lay on the cot and actively cleared her mind. It was a survival mechanism. When the noise faded, the signal came through. She fell asleep instantly. Before the alarm could even ring in the freezing pre-dawn dark, Lyra was awake. The air tasted of sharp dust and sage as the men seamlessly fell into formation. Thorne walked the line with practiced precision. Reaching her, he paused. You sleep, Hayes? Yes, sir. Good. It'll be the last sleep you get for a while. The day commenced with a grueling, heavily weighted assessment run over jagged terrain. Dempsey sidled up to her at the starting line, eyeing her 65-pound pack. Want me to hold some of that weight? It's not a charity offer, it's strategy. If you drop out early, you're dead weight for the rest of the program. I won't drop out, she replied without looking at him.
You're either really confident or really dumb, Dempsey noted.
Could be both. Her quiet retort elicited a quick, involuntary shift in his expression, something between amusement and reassessment before his stoic mask returned.
During the punishing run, while several hardened men visibly struggled with the shifting rocks and crushing packs, Lyra locked into a mechanical, unwavering pace. The weight tore at her shoulders and hips, but she paid the agonizing toll in pure silence. Crossing the finish line a mere handful of seconds behind the unit's undisputed fastest runner, Holden, the resulting silence was palpable. It wasn't the silence of dismissal anymore. It felt like the heavy,
Shifting air pressure right before a storm. Thorne simply made a note on his clipboard. Dempsey whispered to no one in particular. That was the first invisible crack in their absolute certainty.
observation and endurance.
Throughout the relentless day, weapons maintenance, tactical drills, obstacle navigation, she spoke little, but observed everything. She mapped their habits, their strengths, and their vulnerabilities. At lunch, she deliberately sat alone, uninterested in forcing herself into a space she hadn't yet earned.
Suddenly, a tray slammed down across from her. It was a younger operator named Beckett, whose eyes still held a trace of unbruised optimism.
You don't have to sit alone, he offered.
I want to.
He sat down anyway. I'm Beckett.
I know. I read your unit file before I came here.
He paused, processing this. That's either really impressive or really unsettling.
Probably both,
She echoed, making him almost smile.
Beckett leaned in.
You know, Thorne bet the team you'd wash out in a matter of days. He's never been wrong about that call.
There's a first time for everything.
Beckett nodded, his tone softening. For what it's worth, your time on the run was close. Real close. Where did you come from? What's your actual background?
My father,
Lyra said softly, setting down her fork. He was a military long-range shooter. He started training me in distance reading, wind calculation, and breath control when I was a child. When he couldn't teach me anymore, I kept going on my own.
When he couldn't teach you anymore,
Beckett repeated carefully. What happened?
He died.
The blunt reality hung between them, devoid of manufactured pity. Beckett simply nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. Thorne's going to try to break you this afternoon, he warned quietly. He's overloading your pack for the heat simulation. Don't let them see you hurting. They respect endurance more than they'll ever admit.
The afternoon simulation was a brutal trek through exposed, blistering terrain. Lyra's pack was noticeably heavier than the others, yet she marched with agonizingly calculated efficiency, hoarding every ounce of her energy. As men around her cramped and faltered under the baking 109 degrees Fahrenheit sun, Thorne rolled alongside her in a transport vehicle.
You're overheating, Hayes. Your face is flushed and your pace has dropped, he called out. Want to stop?
No, sir. That's not just pride, is it? He asked, the mockery fading into genuine curiosity. No, sir. I know the difference.
Thorne stared at her, an unmistakable glint of reconsideration flickering in his eyes. Why are you here, Hayes? To prove something. To who?
To myself, she said. And to anyone who thinks this is about politics. Thorne accelerated away, leaving her to finish the grueling march precisely in the middle of the pack. When she crossed the line, he made another quiet note on his clipboard. The stillness.
That evening, Lyra gazed at the photograph of her father. She remembered his most vital lesson from when she was a young girl. The shot doesn't care how you feel about it. It only cares about your stillness. Get still enough inside, and the shot finds you. She cleared her mind. Tomorrow was the live fire range. It was time to show them what she truly was. Awake long before the sun, Lyra was greeted by Beckett,
who seemed in awe of her unshakable routine. He warned her that Thorne would make her shoot last to maximize the psychological pressure. Lyra calmly noted that she had already predicted Thorne's exact strategy, pushing the distance until people failed testing their composure under pressure, rather than just their marksmanship. Beckett realized she was reading the Master Chief just as flawlessly as she read the wind.
On the firing line, under the intensifying desert heat, the elite shooters took their turns. Holden excelled, while others faltered slightly as distances increased. Finally, Thorne called Lyra forward. "We'll start you at the standard warm-up distance," he ordered.
"I'd prefer to start much further out, sir. You already know your team's baseline. Pushing the distance gives you real comparison data." The range fell dead silent. Thorne stared at her, an unreadable expression on his face, before finally nodding. Lyra settled into her stance. Ignoring the whispered doubts behind her, she found that familiar, profound stillness her father had taught her. She didn't force the shot. She invited it.
"Hit. Center mass. Lucky," Dempsey muttered.
Thorne pushed the target back further. She adjusted for the wind and the heat distortion.
"Hit." He pushed it to an extreme professional sniper distance, a range that made the seasoned operators scoff in disbelief. Accounting for severe heat distortion and shifting desert winds, Lyra went perfectly still and fired. "Hit." She hit the extreme distance target flawlessly, time after time.
When Thorne finally ordered her to stand down, the men weren't mocking her anymore. They were looking at her as if their entire understanding of reality had just fractured. Thorne demanded to know where she learned to shoot like that. Upon hearing she had trained since childhood under her late military father, he simply called for a break, his absolute certainty visibly shaken.
Team dynamics and the kill house.
Beckett approached her in the shade, astounded. "Nobody hits that consistently. You just shattered the unit's best record on your first morning."
"I know," she said calmly.
"Does it scare you?"
"When people find out, no," she replied honestly.
"What scares me is when they find out and they still don't change."
Later that day, Thorne plunged them into a chaotic kill house simulation to test their teamwork and decision-making.
Placed in a squad with Holden and Gallagher, Lyra quickly spotted a nearly invisible tripwire in the shadows. She called a halt.
Holden called Gallagher couldn't see it.
Thorne, monitoring via comms, tested her authority by ordering the men to advance if they couldn't confirm her claim. Gallagher chose rank over instinct and stepped forward. The simulation instantly flashed red. The entire squad was killed.
Instead of deflecting blame during the debrief in the sweltering heat, Thorne faced his men with brutal honesty.
"Hayes called the wire. I overruled her, and you followed me into a trap. Being right without authority is the same as being silent." He used it as a harsh lesson about trusting credible intelligence over blind hierarchy. By the end of the day, Dempsey walked past her and muttered a genuine, "Good call on the wire." It wasn't friendship, but it was the first crack of true respect, an inch of space that hadn't existed before.
The attrition. The ensuing days pushed them to their absolute physical limits. A punishing midday march loaded Lyra with even more excess weight. As her hip flared with a searing ache, she silently adjusted her stride, refusing to display weakness. Dalton, a quiet sniper who revealed he had deeply respected her father's legendary combat service overseas, offered to carry some of her load. She politely declined. When the brutal march concluded in extreme heat, Thorne admitted he had ordered Dalton to make the offer simply to see if Lyra would refuse out of foolish pride or steadfast principle. Recognizing her quiet resilience and managed pain, Thorne realized she wasn't hiding her agony out of arrogance, but out of an ironclad commitment to the process. The final evaluation. The ultimate test was an advanced live-fire sniper evaluation involving moving targets, severe heat distortion, and strict time limits. Reversing the order, Thorne made Lyra shoot first, forcing her to set the standard for the entire elite squad. Target after target, Lyra fired with devastating precision. When the final target appeared at a distance so extreme it defied standard training protocols, Lyra tapped into her father's memory. She breathed, embraced the stillness, and fired. Hit. She scored a flawless run. One by one, the elite SEALs followed, but none could match her execution. Even Dempsey, a man defined by his uncompromising hardness, turned to her and offered a gruff but completely sincere, "Good shooting." The ambush. That night, during a pitch-black navigation exercise, Lyra's squad, consisting of Navarro and Dalton, prowled through the desert. Suddenly, Lyra stopped dead in her tracks. She detected faint, highly disciplined movement on a distant ridge that fell entirely outside the training boundaries. The actors lacked the standard infrared glow. Despite Thorne radioing that the sector was clear, Lyra commanded Navarro to contact base security on a secondary, unmonitored channel. Moments later, the ridge erupted in genuine, unauthorized live gunfire. A hostile surveillance team had infiltrated the perimeter. Because Lyra had trusted her instincts and bypassed the compromised exercise frequency, security forces responded immediately, forcing the hostile team to flee before they could ambush the squad. When Thorne reached her in the chaotic aftermath, stripped of his stoic armor, he looked at her with profound realization. "I've been wrong about you," he confessed into the cold desert night. "Since the first minute, I've been entirely wrong." The aftermath. The next morning, the atmosphere on the base had irrevocably shifted. During formation, Thorne publicly commended Lyra's judgment, admitting his own tactical failure and reinforcing that true authority requires the humility to accept better information. The men didn't just accept her, they closed ranks around her as an equal. Holden apologized for his early dismissal, and even Dempsey treated her with the unqualified respect of a peer. Called into Thorne's office, the Master Chief offered a blunt, sincere apology for dismissing her based on his own biased templates. He then handed her 2 documents, paperwork, fully integrating her into the team on equal footing, and a highly classified recruitment letter from a covert intelligence task force that had been monitoring her astounding performance. "You don't need my permission to be exactly what you are," Thorne told her with deep respect. "People with your gifts have an obligation to use them. Don't waste it." Lyra placed the recruitment letter back on the desk. "I'll answer when the cycle is over. I came here to finish what I started." Stepping back out into the sunlit training yard, Lyra was seamlessly absorbed into the camaraderie of the elite operators. That night, lying on her cot, she looked at the photo of her father one last time, feeling a profound sense of peace. She had walked into a room that violently rejected her, and she had stayed until the room fundamentally changed its mind. She was young, untested by time, but forged in relentless discipline. With a bright, limitless future resting on a commander's desk, Lyra Hayes closed her eyes. She wasn't done yet. She was just getting started.